Hey, welcome back. Hope you had as good a lunch as I did. So carrying on, part two of our making a kilt in real time. I'm going to calculate the pleat widths. Remember, last episode I've did a bunch of other things, but pardon me, I laid out the inner and the outer aprons, made allowance for the apron pleat, marked the first and the last pleat, counted them. So we're going to have 23 pleats. So the next stage is to calculate how wide each pleat must be at the waist and at the hip. Now we're tailoring for a man, so the difference between tailoring between a man and a woman is a pleat. Okay, there's the top of the kilt, there's the strap and buckle line 2.5 inches down, there's the bottom of the kilt. On a man, the kilt, so the pleat tapers from the bottom, tapers to the strap and buckle line, and then is parallel from the strap and buckle line to the top of the kilt. For a woman, top of the kilt, strap and buckle line, the pleat is continuously tapered from one edge of the cloth to the other. So taper, parallel versus full taper. We're tailoring for a guy, so taper to the line. Now, in an earlier episode, I had covered the method developed by pre-literate kilt makers to determine pleat widths. And just a quick recap, 23 pleats, you'd start off by calculating how wide a pleat would be, 23 pleats, how wide, how much material, how much width you would get, I should say, if each pleat was 1/2 inch wide. So half of 23 is 11.5. And then 11.5 isn't enough, so let's see how much width we would cover if the pleat was 5/8. So we count in eighths, and I'm going to count in 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 23. So if each pleat was 5/8 of an inch wide, 5/8 of an inch wide, 23 pleats, you'd have 14 3/8. And this is fun. This is a good exercise, and it's a good skill to know, right? It's underlying, the underlying principles of how to do this. You can do it quickly with a calculator, but you're kind of cheating. It's good. Or not. I think it is such. I honor the old methods because this is a good skill to keep alive. However, it gets a little bit monotonous if you're doing this every time you're making a kilt. And even if you're making your first kilt and you're only likely to make one, again, I had done another video where I composed and showed you how to compose a table of pleat widths most often used in kilt making. I have my issue here. Let's see if I remember to put it in the credits. So what I've done is I've done this work in advance. The advantage to this is the whole process goes a bit quicker and it's less likely to get muddled. So I go to my column of number of pleats, 23, and I go down the list, 1/2, 5/8, 3/4. Well, if a pleat is 3/4 wide, it'll cover 17 1/4, but I need 18, don't I? If I go to the next width, 7/8, it's going to be 20 1/8. If I go to 1 inch, well, of course, 23 1-inch pleats covers 23 inches. So where'd my wretched pencil go? Probably fell on the floor. I'm going to grab another one. It's a carpenter's pencil, but who cares? Okay, so you probably can't see this because it's written in pencil, but again, my split between apron and pleats, waist and hip. So at the hip, 20-inch wide apron, 23 pleats. Okay, 23 pleats, and they'll be 1 inch. Okay, coming back here, as I said, we looked at 3/4, but it was only 17 1/4, which is a ways away from 19, isn't it? Or sorry, from 23. So, wrong, sorry, 18. We need 18 inches at the waist. Okay, so 17 1/4. Well, let's add a 16th. I'm just making sure I'm doing this right. 17 1/4. Okay, let's add a 16th times 23. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 23. And that results in 18 and 8, 10, 18 and 11 sixteenths, which is only 5 sixteenths short of 19, right? And that shortfall will be easily made up by the fringe on the edge of the kilt. And you can see now, you're starting to see now why I do my calculations. I sew all of my pleats, and it's only then that I shape the aprons, because if you get a cumulative error, and you hope you won't, but so, often you do, is as little as the width of a piece of chalk, right? This is, that chalk line is a 16th of an inch wide. So if I measure, if I measure to the wrong side of that chalk line, it snowballs. We wind up with quite a bit of error. So what I'm going to say here, as I said, 17 1/4, I add a 16th. What did that take us up to? Let's do it again. 17, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 23. Okay, so 18 and 8, 11 sixteenths. What I can say is, what would I call it? 18 plus. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this my notation, and again, this won't be visible to you because it's soft pencil, but my pleats, the pleat width at the waist is I'm going to call it 3/4 plus. And the way I'm going to mark that, let me go to my handy dandy little jigs. 7/8, no. 1 1/8, no. Where are y'all here? Now, some might say I should have prepared for my lesson and had everything handy, but I did say this was going to be in real time. Okay, no, that's not an inch. Okay, this one's marked 3/4 plus, so I'm going to put that to one side. 7/8, no. 9 sixteenths, no. Are you an inch? Nope. 11 sixteenths. You're an inch. There we go. I'm going to see what else we got. 15 sixteenths. That's near as damn it to an inch, isn't it? Okay. So I'm just going to test on a piece of cloth here, using my sharp chalk. Yeah, if I measure to the outside of the chalk line, which is quite fine, I get exactly an inch there. Let's see what my 1 inch piece is going to show. I guess we could glorify this by saying that we're calibrating our instruments right now. Okay, that is 1 inch measured to the inside of the chalk lines. Incidentally, there are times someone's figure will, they're essentially cylindrical, same width, same measurement. The waist and the seat have the same measurement. You'd think that you could sew everything absolutely parallel, but that isn't the best case. That isn't the best practice, because it's even if the person's body isn't a section of a cone, we still want to tailor a little bit so it was. So let's imagine this person had, okay, same measurements, 23 pleats, but the waist was the same as the seat. Let's say, yeah, if I was using, when I was marking the pleats, I would mark, I'm using the same measurement, in this case 1 inch, but for the hip measurement, let's say, or actually at the waist measurement, I would be tailoring, I would be sewing to the inside of the chalk mark. On the seat, I would be tailoring to the outside of the chalk mark, and that's a difference of as little as 16th or even 30 seconds of an inch. But even that imperceptible taper will visibly affect how the kilt drapes, how it hangs. So there's something to remember. Okay, so I'm going to stick with my 15-16 measure because it gives me a good inch to the outside of the chalk. I'm going to put that away. I'll put that pencil away, and perhaps when it gets lost in 2 minutes, it will go where the other pencil went, and thus I'll have found it. Okay, let's put my handy-dandy measuring chart away. Again, I really recommend these things. They're good. It's save a lot of time, and also by having a reference chart in front of you, it's a great confidence builder because, oh, there's my other pencil. There we go. Okay, now this table is rather scarred. It began life as a library table. It's quite nice arts and crafts. Well, maybe arts and crafts, I don't know. Locally made, Douglas fir. But it was a library table at the original campus of the University of British Columbia, which was downtown, and is that in the 1920s, I think? So, and then it was an art table after that. So it's a bit scarred. I've been meaning to sand this down or scrape this down to have a perfectly smooth finish. The problem is, being a former museum curator and a historian, these scars and paint blobs and everything else are part of the working history of the table. So I don't know. In any case, because the table's a bit marked up, I'm using a quilting mat as a subsurface. So, right, there's the... Don't be afraid to double check your measurements. Okay, there's 22. Now, all of my gauges are cut to 2.5 inches. So I center them. Some of them have a center mark, but with practice, and you learn to trust your eye, you can accurately center the thing on the spot without a mark. And looking at this imperceptible, this insignificant difference between the widest point of the seat and that red line, yeah, decision time. I'm going to lengthen my fell to the bottom of that red line because I know I can do so without adverse consequences. Okay, so there's the first pleat. Here's the second pleat. Now, I'll do a separate series concerning laying out of the pleats when you're pleating to the set, because that's a good deal more complicated, and there's a good deal more to think about. Okay, so I've marked my first and second pleat. I'm not going to pin it up yet, but if I was to pin it up at this point, I'm going to be referring to these. These are going to stay on the table because I'm going to be referring to these throughout. These are my gauges, right? Because you can get as I said, you can get a cumulative error. And at the waist here, I'm reminding myself that I am sewing to the inside of the chalk line. At the hip, I'm sewing to the outside of the chalk line. Okay, so that's pretty much ready to go. Now I'm going to put these. Here's my little receptacle. Those gauges will go there with all the other information about the kilt. Let's put the chalk out of the way for a minute. And let's go back. There is the center of the apron. Double checking again. Lots of material, more than enough material for the outside edge of the apron. Now, I know I've done everything right, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with going back and checking it one more time, because we're about to reach the point. We're about to cross the Rubicon. Alia electa est, the die is cast after that. So last thing I'm going to do before I rip it, two things I'm going to do before I rip it. I'm marking the cloth. So here's the center of the apron. This part is about to be ripped off and put to one side. This part will become the top band of the kilt. And I've marked this course, I marked where the center is, because I will find, even over a short space of cloth, looking ahead, okay, here's the bottom of the kilt. Let's assume the kilt's all made. I'm ready to put the top band on. I'm going to line up this point in the cloth with that center apron, because if I lined it up with this one or that one or somewhere else, it's a very, very good chance that the cloth, the scale will be, pardon me, ever so slightly larger, even just for a little bit. This is the one point in the cloth that I'm assured that the top strip and the main body of the kilt are to the same scale. And even then, sometimes the cloth can work a little bit. See, if I lay this like that, that one's a little over. So I'm going to have to take care when I do that. Okay, so I've marked that. One more thing to do before we start making the kilt. Where's my white chalk? And again, I just have my own shorthand. I'm not dictating this. I've just, somewhere along the line, I started using different colors of chalk as an aid memoir to what I'm doing. So I use yellow chalk when I'm marking for tailoring, for sewing and shaping and everything else. I use white chalk. When I see a white line, it means I'm cutting there. Okay, laying out the edge. 22 inches, right there. Nice mark, and I'm putting an arrow on it because that's where I'm going to be cutting a nick before I rip it to length. Okay. And you know, I'm going to look at it one more time. Okay, cut. Apron is laid out. Top band is centered. My first pleat gives me an quite adequate inner apron. And there's one other, actually, I just thought of one other advantage to a very deep apron pleat is you're putting more cloth at the front of the kilt. It's giving a little bit more modesty. It's a curtaining effect. Now these days we universally wear sporrans. If you see somebody walking around with a kilt and he's not got a sporran on, you wonder if he finished getting dressed. But until very recently in the timeline, a sporran was only worn for very, very special occasions. And it was by no means unusual to see someone walking around without a sporran. So if you got that little bit extra cloth, it can cloak things, shall we say. I think that's as far as I need to belabor that. Okay, so I got those first pleats, and I'm just going to count them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Good. There's 23. There's my meeting place, as it were. There's my apron, inner apron. Good. Everything is good to go. Right. Let's get you out the way. Okay. I used a Latin tag there a moment ago. I remember there were two, amongst a host of disappointments in my early education. The year before me was the last year to be taught Latin in school. I was quite looking forward to it. I can't explain why, but that was it was an annoyance that I wasn't going to have Latin in my curriculum. The second was because I was always a math dunce. It's only recently that I've enjoyed mathematics. I'm by no means a high-level mathematician, but I used to loathe it, and now I quite enjoy it. I remember in school, in math class, a very large slide rule. This thing was 2 meters long, at least, hanging it over the teacher's head, and it was the teaching tool to teach people how to use a slide rule, and I so looked forward to it. And then of course the class ahead of me was the last class to be instructed in the slide rule, and I felt a bit disappointed about that. Quite disappointed about that. I still might teach myself, because apparently I have a copy of the book, An Introduction to the Slide Rule by Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer. I gave that to my son for Christmas a couple of years ago. I think I might borrow it back, because I have a couple of slide rules, and teach myself how to do that over the winter. It's not like I got anything else to do, right? Okay, so we've measured everything. We've sort of signed off on everything. We've checked the notes one more time so that my errant memory hasn't misremembered anything. We know in every respect we're conforming to the client's demands, the apron being centered, the style of pleating, all of that stuff. We've measured it a couple of times. You notice I just measured it a second ago. Now, here's the point of no going back. And I should add, I did all of my chalking. I did all of my flipping the cloth back and forth before making this stage, because as careful as I can be, there are going to be some yarns come off of this, but this is such good cloth that it tends to self-seal, as it were. You know, it'll lose 3 or 4, maybe 5 yarns, but then it starts to resist that a little bit. I mean, you can claw at it and tease it out, but by doing all my chalking first and then, only then cutting this, I'm minimizing the amount of yarn I'm going to lose off the top. I don't know why I'm coughing today. Okay, right, here we go. And now I tear rather than cut, because a tear is giving me absolutely a straight line. It's going on precisely along whatever that point is in the thread count. That looks at about 10 yarns, I think. Okay, away we go. Funny, I can smell a bit of a burning smell. So I wonder what effect is happening at the, I don't know, molecular level with the wool, that I get a burning smell. Okay, the topper edge I let fall to the floor. Now I'm being a bit ginger, as in careful, not ginger as in a redheaded. Fun fact, my trade name is Ian Glass, Grey John, therefore gray-haired John. At one time, I didn't have a trade name when I was younger, but it would have been Ian Rory, red-haired John. I was at least in a horse, I guess I'd be a strawberry roan, you know, brown with a trace of red and red highlights. Okay, we see a bit of a gathering right there where a yarn is resisted a bit. I can just pull it flat and it's fine. With other cloth from other mills, and I needn't even say the word inferior cloth, substandard cloth, that would happen far more often. But it doesn't happen very much with Dalglish cloth. Okay. Okay, there's only the second one, and there's my cloth tape measure rocketing to the floor as usual. Yeah, you see we've already got 1, 2, 3, and the beginning of the 4th yarn. Getting loose. Okay, yeah, there's only 2 pulls in that entire length, which is tremendous. Okay, so let's get because I'm a lefty, I'm keck-handed in the old language. Okay, there we are where we marked. Let's just get these yarns out of the way. There we are where we'd marked at hip and at waist. Okay. Going through the stuff. Let me just get some dust in the air, something like that. I have some scar tissue in my lungs, courtesy of tear gas and other irritants. Okay, now let's grab my gauges again. Right, 4 pins. I think I'd mentioned elsewhere that because my first fellow I first apprenticed under, he was right-handed, as most people are, and he would tailor in the traditional way. He'd be sitting cross-legged on the table with a cloth around his knees, and he'd be crossing his legs and capturing the cloth in where his legs crossed to hold it in place so he could pull it taut and sew it. Well, I never learned how to do that, so I don't. Being left-handed, pardon me, being left-handed simply wouldn't work for me. Anyway, okay, white chalk, I don't need you. Okay, so there's my chalk lines. I'm going to roll the cloth in so the chalk line isn't visible. And this is the wonderful thing about working with tartan, is the design on the cloth acts a little bit like grid paper, so it greatly aids accuracy. Okay. So you see there, I'll pin the strap line and then pin the top. Generally, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. This time I went 1, 2, 3, 4. But generally, you want to pin the top before you pin this, because we pin it, we stretch it so the cloth takes the shape, or takes the line that we want. Okay, that's all ready for to start sewing. And I notice, this is something else we talked about, the customer and I, but we didn't mention it until now. And I'll show this again later, is that after this is pressed, when the kilt is done and he's walking, you're going to get this, again, this black, almost a checkerboard, a vertical checkerboard, if I may say, across the back when he's standing still. But when he's walking, you're going to get a flash of red. It's going to be quite remarkable. As far as I know, I'm the only person who's ever made a deal about that, and certainly I think ever talked about it. One other factor to consider when choosing how to pleat. Okay, I'm going to take a pause now, and in my third section, I'll be sewing this first. I'll be sewing a couple of seams. I don't think, as much as I said real time, I don't think you need to see me sew all 23 seams. But in the next session, I'll do a couple of seams and talk you through that. Right, talk to you in a bit.